All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Heritage Kingston meeting. Mr. Chair, we do currently have quorum. Would you like me to wait a minute or two to see if we get a couple more members before we go?
Yeah, I'm counting 6. It would be nice if we just wait a minute, especially since it was a council meeting last night. So if that's okay, wait a couple of minutes and go at 9:33. There's 7.
Mr. Chair, it's now 9:33. Would you like me to go ahead and get started?
Yep, please.
Excellent. All right, welcome everyone to the Heritage Kingston meeting. Joining us from our committee is Peter Gower, Jennifer Demeter, Donald Mitchell, Donald Taylor, Paul Banfield, Jane McFarlane, and Ted Smith. Currently missing are Councillor Doherty, Councillor Oosterhoff, Jolinka Burney, Janine O'Reilly. I do believe Councillor Oosterhoff was just with us, so hopefully he'll be able to jump back on here quickly. Joining us from staff are Jennifer Campbell, Director of Heritage Services, Ryan Leary, Senior Planner, Philip Farrell, Intermediate Planner, Alex Rose Thompson, Planner, and Ian Sullivan is our meeting host this morning. We also have 4 applicants and agents in the meeting, and we do not have any members of the public in the gallery, Mr. Chair. And with that, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Madam Clerk. Welcome, everybody. It's a nice, bright day. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but today's a nice, bright day. Approval of the agenda. Under other at the end, I know Dr. Campbell has got a couple of comments that she would like to make. Does anybody else have any other proposed changes to the agenda? And seeing none, look for a mover to approve the agenda with the addition. Don Mitchell, seconded by Jane McFarland. Any further discussion? Seeing none, those in favour, those opposed. So you have an agenda. Minutes of January the 19th. I have had no notice of any corrections, changes, or improvements to those. Does anybody else have any comments? If not, I'll look for a mover and a seconder to have those approved. So seeing none, a mover, Jane McFarlane, seconder, Paul Banfield. Discussion on those minutes. And seeing none, those in favor of approval as printed.
Aye.
And that is all. Thank you, Ted. That is all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 present voting in favor. Pecuniary interest, the usual reminder. Firstly, the question, if anybody knows now of a pecuniary interest in any of what we will be discussing, can you state it now? And if you realize during the discussion that you do have such, please state it as soon as possible and we'll look after it then. Seeing nothing on that, we will move on to presentations, delegations, briefings, business. I don't think there's anything of any. Oh yes, Councillor Ustav.
Sorry, good morning, Mr. Chair and everybody. The question I had is, would the Middle Road file individuals representing the Mance be able, are they to speak now or during the file when we open it?
No, they will speak during, unless they have asked for as a delegation, which I have not been informed, they will be able to speak during the discussion.
Okay, I thought, Mr. Chair, I thought that they did. Maybe a clerk could clarify that. I had thought they just wanted to share with the committee the situation there.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you enlighten us on that one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, there is not a formal delegation that has been requested for the Middle Road file. However, the applicants are able to speak to the matter when the business item is on the floor, and they will be given up to 5 minutes in which to speak to it.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I just wanted clarity. I couldn't remember how that was working again. Thanks.
No, they will get their chance, and I know they are with us. Business, I don't know of anything unless Dr. Campbell wants to say there is. Cultural heritage, policy development, heritage assets, which brings us into stat business, 2368 Middle Road. And I believe, Philip, that is your file.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Oh, for some reason, I'm not coming on my background. That's disappointing. Anyways, I will.
We'll believe you're there, don't worry.
Yes, I promise I am. I'm actually just as a heads up, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, there seems to be Utilities Kingston's work on my sewer connection right now, and there's jackhammering. So I'm in my basement trying to do my best to minimize the noise. So I apologize for the potential disruption. Anyways, so this is an application for a window removal for an alteration. And so this is for 2368 Middle Road. The subject property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And next slide, please. The subject property is on its own lot, separate from the church, and is approximately 38 meters from Middle Road. Next slide, please. The picture to the top left is the front south-facing facade of the subject property. The picture to the top right is the view of the east facade of the manse from the road in winter. The picture at the bottom right is the view of the south and west facade of the manse from the road when entering the driveway for the adjacent church. And the picture to the bottom left is the view of the manse from the driveway approximately 25 meters from the building. Next slide, please. So the property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The designation bylaw describes the following relevant attributes to this file. The manse was built in 1863, resembles an irregular building pattern when viewed from above. All the main block window and door openings are slightly arched with voussoirs and have cement lug sills. All windows are double hung with six lights per sash, except those on the south facade of the north/south block. The south facade facing Middle Road has a 3-section window with 8 lights per section on the first story and a second-story lancet window with intricate glazing bars in a 20 light double lancet pattern. The south-facing main entrance doorway has a 4-paned regular transom, and to the west of the doorway are a pair of French doors with 10 lights per casement. These 2 first-floor openings are sheltered by a 1-story hip-roof veranda. The west facade has 2 upper and 2 lower story windows. The north facade has 1 upper and 1 lower story window and a plain trim door. The north/south block has 1 upper story window on the north facade, but the lower story window is obscured by the kitchen extension. The 1-story regular kitchen wing is attached to the main end of the house with a flat-headed opening like that on the main block, and the east facade has 2 lower story windows and a single window in the gable above. Next slide, please. So these are the windows in question here that are of note of this file. So according to the designation bylaw, all the windows on this slide are listed as attributes. The goal of this application is to replace the 9 period windows along the east, west, and north facades while retaining the existing south facade with the most impressive windows that face the road. So those windows are not part of this application. The windows that are in the slide, as you can see, are, according to Mr. Brownie, the qualified professional who made the quote for the applicant, are complete and original to the house. Staff contacted Mr. Brownie, who noted that further review of all the windows in more detail would be required prior to confirming, quote, if the period windows are so deteriorated that even if repaired, very little original material would remain. According to the window policy, such a determination is required before staff can support window replacement. Staff also attended the subject property on January 7th and 28th and had the opportunity to see the inside of the windows. Although staff cannot determine the repairability, as we are not such qualified professionals, the quote from Mr. Brownie provides multiple cost options to fully restore the windows or select parts of the windows, which appears to leave a path open to repairability based on the limited information provided. As such, staff do not support the replacement of these period windows at this time. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing to replace the existing windows with visually similar vinyl windows with the same number of lights, style, and external Muntin bars, and cite the cost of the window repairs or wooden replacements as a major component of their decision to go with this design and material. The hope is that these vinyl windows will look nearly identical to the existing from the road and driveway of the subject property and better control the mold buildup on the interior of the existing windows. Next slide, please. In summary, staff's recommendation is to retain and repair the windows, the 9 windows that are the subject of this application. Next slide, please. I want to note the 5th condition here, in that should replacement be justified through a detailed assessment, details of all replacement windows, including elevation and section drawings showing the appropriate historic pattern, proportions, and measurements shall be submitted to heritage staff prior to installation to ensure they represent a replication window that is detailed enough to the original. Essentially, if further information is provided through a qualified professional assessment, this condition would allow that opportunity with further staff review to allow such replacement based on the following in the associated conditions. And with that, I will leave it in your hands, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Philip. Committee members, questions? Councillor Oosterhoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if it's possible that we could hear from the representatives so that it gives context to a couple of comments that I would make. Like I've been there twice. I'm still confused a little bit about which windows. So this recommendation, my computer failed again, so I'm on a backup computer here. I can't read the complete recommendation because I only have one working. So normally I go with one on Zoom. So I can't really, just help me there, Mr. Prowl. We have, this is for 9 windows, but the request from the Middle Road representatives is to do 9 in vinyl, but I'm confused as to what the recommendation is and what the request was. Can you clarify that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely, Councillor Oosterhoff. So in this case, the 9 windows that are not facing the road, not all of them, but the major period windows are the ones that are being requested for replacement. And if they were replaced, the applicant is requesting for them to be put into a visually similar vinyl material.
Yes. Okay. So that will be what we are going to consider today? Or are we considering? Yes. Okay. I thought it was the other way around. And I do, so Mr. Chair, I'll go back. Is it possible before I speak to this that we would hear from the representatives, or can you come back to me after?
I can certainly come back to you after without any problems at all, because you'll be able to ask a question to the
Thank you.
To the briefing. Yeah, if that's
Okay,
the easier way of doing it.
Yeah, well, it helps me to make sure
Yep.
I'm trying to understand the everything that's happening here and give due consideration to the representatives. Thank you.
Good. No, we'll keep that one in mind. Dr. Campbell.
Thank you, and through you. I wanted to jump in a little bit because I think I just want to make sure that the councillor and everyone on the committee has clarity about the request from the applicant versus the recommendation prepared by staff, because I do think there is a difference in the two. So the request from the applicant was to replace the 9 windows with a vinyl that is appropriate to the original heritage character or intent. However, the windows policy requires us to assess those period windows, which has been done at a high level, and they are wood period windows. So staff are recommending through the policy that we would request repair. The permit would be an approval to repair the period windows. It has a condition 4 and condition 5, that do allow that if a qualified professional, as Philip indicated, was to do a detailed assessment of each window, and in each case was to find them to be so deteriorated that repair was not possible, then staff would then engage through the appropriate windows policy process to consider replacement windows. And currently we usually do not favor vinyl in a window replacement scenario. We would be looking for an aluminum clad wood, though we do acknowledge that high quality vinyl windows are increasingly available on the market, but I just wanted to make sure that was very clear for committee. What the applicant has requested and what staff have brought forward to recommend, there is a path here for that continued discussion of replacement, but only if a qualified professional were to demonstrate and document appropriately that the windows could not be repaired with retention of sufficient amounts of the original material.
Good, thank you very much for that. Jennifer.
Awesome. Just to clarify, we're voting on staff's recommendation.
Yes, yeah. As printed.
Awesome. Okay.
Further discussion, which I suspect may come after the applicant has spoken. Seeing none then, Gary, I presume you wish to speak, Gary Bullock, for the church. And Ian, if we could unmute Gary Bullock.
Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to ask Mr. Bullock here to unmute. Just give us one moment.
There he is. Good.
Sorry, Mr. Bullock, we can't hear you just yet. There we go.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome again.
Well, just thank you for hearing our concerns about our windows. I am filling in for the chair of this committee, Bruce Higgs. And basically, we put a little committee together. The manse windows has been a concern for a few years, and we've got a new minister in, and we put a little committee together to make the manse a little more friendly. They have a 4-year-old child, and we haven't had a minister for a couple of years, so we're very excited about the times right now. The original intent when we first talked about this was to replace 2 windows on the west end, second floor of the manse to replace one window at the rear of the manse, the north side of the manse, and one window on the east side of the manse, all on the second floor. These windows, along with a few others, many of them do not open and close properly. Sometimes, depending on the weather, they swell. We've used pinch bars and screwdrivers to try to get them open in past years. So they're not really user-friendly that way. They're by no means are energy efficient. They're subject to mold and mildew. Some of the windows that build up. I've been up myself last year on 2 occasions at the request of a part-time minister to express concerns about that buildup. They just don't allow for a proper air movement on the second floor. And the storm windows on the second floor windows in particular it's got to the point where they're almost dangerous to put on and off. We have to borrow or rent ladders. The people that do it, myself and another gentleman, are mid-70s. It's almost dangerous being up on a 15 or 20-foot ladder. It takes 2 persons just to hold one of these storm windows to get them on and off spring and fall. So with all that in mind, we thought we would try to go with a vinyl window, one that's energy efficient, help with the heating costs because they're quite expensive in the manse. Maintenance-free windows that don't need painting and caulking and all of that. Environmentally friendly windows that don't promote the buildup of mold and the elimination of those storm windows that are getting harder and harder to put on and off as our help gets fewer and fewer and we get older and older. So we just thought that vinyl windows of some type would best suit our needs. And the chairman at the time, Mr. Higgs, who isn't here today and asked me to speak, thought, why don't we ask for all the windows being vinyl with the exception of the front windows, and they would stay the same. They're the ones facing the road. And we would leave those the same, but all on other windows, first and second floor, we try to go with vinyl. So in that regard, Mr. Higgs got a couple of prices on vinyl windows from a couple of different companies, and they come in to do 9 between $15,000 and $20,000, which is we'd have to do fundraising, which is probably doable. So that was the thought there. We proceeded to get a hold of Philip at the city. He was very, very helpful, but he said, wait just a minute, there's some other steps there you have to follow, because this was all new for us. So he gave us a list of 10 names that are contractors that are used by the Heritage Committee. Mr. Higgs sent out emails to all 10 of those contractors to have them come and look at the windows. No one came. Through one of those contractors, though, they gave us a name of a gentleman who might be interested in looking at the windows. Mr. Higgs contacted that gentleman who does window repair. He came, looked at the windows for 15 or 20 minutes. And at the end of his visit, he prepared a letter and sent it to Mr. Higgs a few days later. And I believe, I don't have the exact figures, but I believe his estimate was somewhere between $60,000 to $65,000 to repair the wooden windows. They thought that they could be repaired for that kind of money. Well, that for an old country church trying to survive, that's a humongous figure. So anyways, as compared to 15 or 20 for vinyl type windows. We contacted Councillor Oosterhoff, who was very helpful, and as well, some members of the Heritage Committee came down and they looked at the windows in a little more detailed fashion, and then and came back and I guess made a reference to the committee or spoke to your committee about that. And I guess that's about where we are now. I just finished by saying, I don't know what's good or bad. Our original intent, when we first talked about the windows, was the second floor windows. I believe there's 4 of them, because those are the ones that appeared to be in most need of help. And but like I say, if we're doing 4, we didn't know why don't we ask for the 9 windows? They'd all be the same that way. There's a home about 5 miles up the road on the John F. Scott Road that has had new vinyl windows or aluminum windows, I'm not sure, according to the Heritage Committee, put in, and they look beautiful. My mother-in-law down the road 6 or 7 years ago in a Heritage home had vinyl windows put in her home, and they look beautiful. We would do the windows exactly the same as what's there. And so that's where we're at now, sir. I don't know what else to say. I'd be happy to answer any questions,
Yep.
But that's sort of the background, sir.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, welcome Councillor Doherty to the meeting, and Councillor Oosterhoff, you probably have first chance of questions here.
All right. Yeah, good morning, Gary. And I see that Jean is here too. Hello, Jean. And it's good to have you here and to hear your experience. So that's good. And I really appreciate the committee members that came out to the meeting. And Philip's done a great job too of escorting the committee through Mr. Bullock and others through the home. And as you can see from the pictures that we saw, I mean, I had a second look at it, and it's just it is a very, very special property, and I think everybody recognizes that and wants to find a way through this one here. So, Mr. Bullock, the question I had initially, so you went from, I just want the committee to be aware that your request originally was for the 4 windows on the second floor, but again, you would put every effort into the south viewing would not be touched, because the south view, which is about 40 meters from the road, you would do everything to maintain that perfect look, I guess, right? Is that what you were thinking?
That's right, Councillor Oosterhoff. We wouldn't touch the windows facing the road.
Yeah, and then so I do still get a little bit. So that's total of the 4, I guess, 2 windows in the west, 1 in the north, and 1 in the east. And so yeah, and walking around, I saw the situation with the storm windows, and I think I would like the committee to understand the challenge that those storm windows are. I'm not that old, but I certainly remember changing storm windows with my dad on the farmhouse growing up, and I thought it was exciting to be risking my life there as a young fella, but it's not exciting as you get older to do that. So I do want to, so I'm concerned about the livability, and it's one of the points I want to make to the committee. Can you tell me what they're experiencing in that house for livability? You have concerns about the mold. Is it something that you're always maintaining? Mr. Bullock? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the mold has been there for a number of years. Came to our attention in the last year or 2. We had a part-time minister in there, and she phoned about several things about the manse. And as a result of some of those phone calls, we did spend a few $1,000s refurbishing the inside with some new paint, et cetera, to make it more a friendlier place, a more comfortable place to live. I was up there 2 occasions myself with Javex and taking mold off the inside of the windows. I know Mr. Higgs was up there on 1 occasion doing the same thing, and that's within the last 2 years. And I know we've had a conversation with our current minister about the mold that's on the window. She has a 5-year-old son that sleeps in the 1 room on the 2nd floor facing the west. That's the 2 windows that are opposite the church. And she has a 5-year-old son that sleeps in 1 of those rooms. So that's a very sincere concern for us. And like I say, we're excited about having this new lady. She's a absolutely she's a good lady. We're excited about the future that she brings for our church, and certainly we want to address any concerns, particularly as it relates to health and safety. So that's part of the reason for our request.
The windows that you did consider for vinyl, through the chair, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, the windows that you had considered, were they, what level of quality? What kind of quality did you find? Was it someone who was aware of the heritage component of this building, and were they like exact? The vinyl ones that you were considering, that you were asking for originally?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, you said that you had a price for vinyl windows, except for the south, but you had some pricing for vinyl windows. You
Yes.
did get some pricing, and were they an exact replica? Were they the quality that we would look for?
Yes, they were. Mr. Higgs contacted, I'm not sure who the two companies were, but contacted two companies. I think, if I can say, I think they were Kingston Plate and Window, and I think Umans, and there might have been one more. But that was, yes, that was part of his, the requirement that they would be identical to the ones that were already there, because in talking with Philip, we knew that the Heritage Committee were very sensitive to that. We want to keep a Royal Country Church looking old and original. I'm very much a little bit tradition in regards to history. I've got a 69 Firebird that I keep in a garage, and I like old things. I like looking after old things,
So the other question, Mr. Bullock, through the chair, is regarding, so that was the 9 windows, but at this time though, I understand there are 3 windows that are creating a bit of a crisis for livability there. You showed me, I think, give me the north side, or maybe the one more, but 3 windows that were creating, the mold and mildew, and that were the most problematic for living there. Is that true? Is it 3?
It's 4, Councillor Oosterhoff. There's
Okay.
there's two on the second floor on the west end. And there's one on the back where the minister's study is, and there's one. The bathroom window is also on the second floor, which we have to on the east side, which we have to put storm windows on and off, and those windows are barely visible at all from the road. Certainly, spring, summer, and fall, you can't even see those windows from the road.
Thanks, Gary. Mr. Chair, I have more questions for Philip later, but when would that be happening? Do we you go to more questions for the presenters, or do we?
Let's go around the committee and see see what you have left over then. Okay, Jennifer.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. So as the architect of the group, I just had a couple of comments on mold in a house. I mean, not having seen the space, but mold is usually a result of multiple factors. So replacing the windows won't actually necessarily solve the problem. So having mold or condensation happens when you're going from warm to cold, especially if that area itself is humid. So that's probably part of the cause. Having adequate ventilation in that space is going to be part of your issue. So even if you replace it to vinyl, that could persist. I mean, having leaky windows, like an old wood one, can definitely be part of that cause, because you're getting the really cold coming through the window, and then you have the condensation. But adding storm windows is usually does help with that. And if you did replace them with wood, that should also help with that. But yeah, so just FYI, there's possibly other things that are creating that mold factor in the home.
Good, thank you. Further comments, questions from the committee? And seeing none, Councillor Oosterhoff, do you want to add anything else then?
Just a question then for committee, but also Mr. Crowell, and maybe Ms. Campbell too. There is a consideration, or there's a review happening, I think, for, I wrote this down somewhere, and I was wondering where that was headed. In the context, Mr. Chair, is that the policies regarding windows is rigid, and I think, and I appreciate that every file that we have is unique. And I was wondering where do we imagine, or where can we see this going in the future? Because I think that that's something that is being rewritten. Did I not hear that correctly?
Ryan or Jennifer, who wants to answer that one? Jennifer?
Thank you, and through you, and thank you, Councillor Oosterhoff. I can certainly take that. Yeah, as part of the work plan for the Heritage Services Department over the course of 2022, we are reviewing the windows policy, and that will involve consultation with this committee, as well as likely discussions with one of the working groups of the committee that focuses on built property matters. The review of the windows policy has been outstanding for a number of years. In particular, we want to make sure that we're taking into consideration the new products that are available on the market. So things like vinyl of a high quality. So currently the windows policy does reference specifically things like aluminum clad replacements of wood. So we just want to make sure that what we are enacting through our policy is considering what is actually available and appropriate in the market when replacement is justified. But we also want to clarify through the policy updates how windows should be assessed, mechanisms and ways that we would encourage applicants to consider repairability as, essentially the primary position of Heritage. And this is true across Ontario, where we see Heritage windows at every Heritage committee in consideration. It is almost always the position of Heritage groups and supports that we would start with a repair request, and then we would move from that only if and when repairability is not a viable option. So what we are trying to do with the policy update, again, to summarize, is by the end of 2022, we would like to just have clarity for applicants so that as they come in, they know what we are looking for, they understand what a qualified professional would be asked to assess or speak to, and that we would have the stronger ability when replacement requests come in to, through the policy, consider appropriate replacements that could include vinyl, but only in cases where the vinyl can be demonstrated to meet all of our requirements in terms of a similar replacement or a like-for-like replacement, if you will, even though they're not like-for-like.
So, through the chair,
yes,
that's really helpful, Ms. Campbell. And so that is sort of where I'm probably going to go with this, is that we can anticipate that there's going to be changes across Ontario to consider higher quality products and more. Again, every situation is different, and I will be asking this committee to consider something a little bit different than just this recommendation, because of factors that concerning livability and servicing and the current. This place is that special that I think that we don't want to see things get so bad. I think that we need to consider that this, to implement, I think, the rigidity of this recommendation, even though number 5 sort of gives us that number 5 on the recommendation. So it says, hey, we will work with them along the way. And I appreciate that, but I stumble over, it seems to me, and we sort of saw that with other windows. It just seems to me that it's all in the eyes of the professional, and though I respect it, it still could be detrimental to this building, and whether it will ever get done at that cost. So I am wondering, as we go, once we see the recommendation brought forward, I have another idea with that I'll consider based on what I'm hearing again this morning.
Okay, thank you. Don Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I wanted to raise a few things, but first, even partially to Councillor Oosterhoff's last comment, I feel that I'm going to be supporting the staff recommendation as a committee member, and partly because I think staff have done a really good, successful, detailed job a number of times on these types of applications of going through what is the relevant policies and guidelines and balancing that with these other considerations. So when I looked through it, I felt that it was very supportable, but I wanted to raise a number of other things and touch on a few other points that I think are, from my perspective, are relevant. One is that these buildings were designated together. And I could say it later on, but I'll preface it that, you know, for almost 12 years now, I've been heavily involved with the church property and a manse type relationship and the future of churches. So a lot of these comments come from my secular position happening to work for a church organization, but they were designated together. And when I looked at this property, I think that that designation is important. In fact, you see that they're even severed with that relationship in mind. You also see that, I think it was Chairperson Gower made a comment about the west facing. I think that the west facing is equally as important as the road or the street facing. A number of times people keep raising the street, but I think this is a Part 4 property that was meant to be walked. It was meant to be engaged. It was meant to have many people, and that's proven in the number of renovations that have occurred to it over the years. So even though Part 4 sort of, to a layperson kind of perspective, seems to look from the lot lines in, I think that there is a level of sort of a Part 5 type nature with this whole property where it's meant to have this relationship back and forth. The report speaks to some conscious choices in development, but also conscious choices in windows. That includes the church property as well as the manse. And I think that that should be considered and respected. And so that came up for me. I'll note that it was said earlier that the windows were all original, but I think somewhere in the report I saw that it also says that the storms were likely not original. So I just wanted to raise that for clarity. I also think it's important the heritage uses of manse properties and what they brought, being a dwelling for the minister right next door to the church, and the relationship, those intangible relationships of having your minister actually living on the property, engaged for the congregation, engaging with the minister, and especially having gone several years without a minister and now having a minister again. And so again, it's those relationships that I think are really important that we also have to consider beyond just the heritage. So these buildings are purpose-built heritage. And later I was going to mention it, but I'll mention it now. You know, rural versus urban is really important. You know, the organization or organizations that I work for have a completely different direction that they will probably go, being an urban church. And I thought over the years, really, some of the urban churches should be supporting the rural churches better, because these buildings are very, very expensive. So we need to remember that a report came out in 2018, I think it was, but between 2019 and 2029, Canada will lose 9,000 church buildings. 9,000 places of worship will disappear in that 10-year period is the estimation. And we're already seeing considerable motion going that direction already. So these are another subpoint of that is these were buildings that were constantly adapting, we're constantly developing and growing over time, and they were finding new uses and modern uses all along the way. And in the peak of the 1970s with church buildings, that's when a lot of these expansions happened. There's also something that happened in the 1980s into the 1990s where many of these properties started to not be cared for in the same fashion that they had been previously. And whether that's to do with diminished capacity or not, I'm not sure, but we all got ourselves into similar troubles with the properties, and these are expensive buildings to maintain. So the other thing I wanted to bring out was just this idea that the sensibilities of these properties change over time. It was interesting to me that Donald Hay laid the cornerstone of the tower and belfry. So the original developer came back and actually was involved in something that was a substantial, I would argue, for lack of a better term, artistic change in the building. And in some way, that's a form of endorsement. And so I think these buildings were intended to have these different changes. I'm not qualified to speak to whether vinyl windows or metal-clad wood one or the other lives out the essence of that. But I think we have to keep in mind that we're moving forward, that we will see enviro shapes increasingly more than we will see cedar, and somebody needs to weigh in on that. And it sounds like staff are going to do that. I want to bring up a couple points just to finish, which is we also have to remember that there are not necessarily no options. Many churches have sold their manse properties. Many ministers nowadays with their housing allowance choose not to live in a manse property right next to the church, but elsewhere. So I don't want to be totally bleak. There are options, but I do think it's more of a challenge for a rural church than it is for an urban church in terms of engagement. And my hope would be, as was implied in the report, if the congregation is dwindling, my hope would be that we use these two properties in that area to actually bring people back to engaging there. And there are many types of uses that you could do to do that. But to finish again, I would support the staff recommendation because I find it very fair and balanced with flexibility should there be other troubles. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chair.
Good, thank you, Dan. Jennifer?
Hey, I guess I just had a different take on what Jennifer was saying, and maybe she could clarify, was the idea that if it can be replaced, the staff will continue in the new policy to enforce repair versus replacement. And it would only be if something couldn't be replaced or couldn't be repaired, that something like the vinyl window would be put in. So as it is right now, if it can't be repaired, then an aluminum is allowed, aluminum clad wood, and then she would be looking into including vinyl under that, not just replacing repairable windows with vinyl windows, which goes against sort of our values as a heritage community. Also, in terms of the livability, I guess what I was trying to say earlier is whether they're repairing the new or the existing windows or replacing with vinyl, that should solve the leaky window problem and help with that mold issue. And but also they should look at possible other factors that whether they're replacing with vinyl or repairing the wood could be affecting that mold. So putting in a humidifier and looking at how they could better ventilate the space. Also, I would actually suggest maybe they look at just replacing those or repairing those 3 problem windows as a way to, of course, reduce the large cost of doing that to the wood windows as a way that's possibly in their budget and keeps within sort of the heritage mandate.
Okay, thank you. Paul Benfield?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, a question to Mr. Bullock, and then I guess a comment and perhaps a question out of that comment as an aside. The question to Mr. Bullock, you mentioned that there's 4 south-facing windows and nothing is happening with them. Are they fine? Is there nothing wrong with them? Or I just would like some clarification on that.
We didn't consider the south-facing windows, the ones facing the road, because we got the impression that that would be the most sensitive for the Heritage Committee. And two of those are on the bottom and one are on the second floor. The second floor window, we just put a new storm window on that a few years ago, but the inside windows on that room, they open up. They could use some attention as well, but we just thought that we could live with the front windows as is, and that's basically it. We thought it would be extremely hard to do anything with those windows because of the Heritage Committee.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Bullock. My comment and perhaps a question out of it, it seems to be a little concerning. Mr. Bullock mentioned that there was a list of 10 individuals that the city has that someone like Mr. Bullock or the church could contact about their problem with windows. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Bullock said not one of them returned his call. Perhaps the city should be looking at that list and perhaps getting some new people. I mean, at the very least, I mean, I realize there may be other issues around, they may be very busy, blah, blah, blah. But at the very least, I would have thought they would have had the decency to at least acknowledge that there had been some contact. So if someone from the city would like to comment about that, I'd certainly be happy to hear what they have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Jennifer Campbell.
Thank you, and through you. I'm also going to just comment quickly on Jen's question as well, because I think that maybe got skipped. And then I'll come back around, Paul, if that's okay. I've been taking some notes. So Jen, I think you were asking specifically kind of about where we are in terms of the future, perhaps amendments to the windows policy, in particular in relation to repair versus replacement. There is no intent at this time to alter the policy in such a way that we would move directly to replacement. The position of Heritage Services is certainly that heritage conservation starts with the repair of existing heritage attributes, and windows are a vital component of a building. And their primacy in understanding a building for us means the wood, when can be retained, should be. So we will always begin with the position of repair. And then, as we have currently, if the windows are documented to be so deteriorated that replacement is appropriate and supportable, that we would want to expand our consideration of what replacement windows could be made of. So the materiality, but still the primacy would be on that they look almost identical to the windows that are being removed because they cannot be repaired. So I hope that offers some support to that question. I would just add to that our in effect windows policy does list some material considerations for replacement. This is not a shall list. This is a consideration list, and vinyl is not on the list. So by its omission, it is we've sort of operated with it not being a preferred option. But as I mentioned earlier, vinyl windows have improved greatly if you are looking at a high quality vinyl replacement. It is not where staff would normally want to go when we're looking at replacing a wood window. We'd like to see a replacement window that would be wood. But I think we do need to be very open to the realities of the market and some of these additional considerations. So we'd have to think about this and look at it. And that's what we were intending to allow for in the condition 4 and 5. So then moving, Paul, if I may, to the question of the list. The City of Kingston does not have a list of individuals who have been rostered. A roster is quite different for the city. That means we've credentialed the people in such a way, and they have submitted their professional information so that the city can essentially say to people, work through this roster as the only list. What has happened over the course of time is that people who need qualified professionals don't know who they are. So the city has essentially amassed an informal list. And so those 10 individuals have not guaranteed that they are available at this sort of need of community members. It is really just meant to say sort of similar to, here are all the electrical companies in town who may be able to support the rewiring of your house. That list is always added to. Even as recently as last week, we discussed making a couple new additions because we had learned of some qualified heritage carpenters in town who could be added to the list. So that's sort of where the list is at right now. We've never moved to a kind of city endorsed list because that then obviously has additional considerations and regulations that would be needed around it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Paul. Jane McFarlane.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I've been listening with great interest here, and I understand firsthand how much time, effort, and expense go into maintaining wood windows. However, I think I definitely will be supporting staff's recommendation because I do believe that by replacing these, you're going to have an adverse effect on the heritage attributes of this building. And although in the short term, you might save money and headaches by putting in vinyl. I don't think I agree with Jen in the long term. The mold is a building issue as opposed to a window issue. And I'd like to suggest to the applicant that maybe the easiest way to handle this is to go back to your original idea of repairing the 4 windows that probably need the most attention. And I think it would be an interesting exercise to make the project smaller and more manageable for you, and to end up and see where it goes. You may find that by fixing the storms, fixing the windows, they're totally functional, and you've spent the same amount of money that you would have spent on replacement windows, but you have maintained the heritage value of the building. Thank you.
I see a hand from Jean Cooper, and I'm not sure who Jean Cooper is. Will you fit in them?
I'm with Gary as well, a representative with St. John's Property.
Okay.
And I just wanted to address the 10 vendors, and thank you, Jennifer, for that update. We did contact all 10, and 3 did reply and say that they were very busy and would not be able to provide a quotation, and the rest did not respond. Also, that was a great PowerPoint presentation by the committee representative. The pictures were of the outside of the manse, and I have pictures of the windows on the inside of the manse. And if you look at them, it very clearly shows the deterioration of the wood. I propose that maybe someone reassess looking at the inside of the manse windows, because I don't think there'd be very much window material left to maintain or repair that window. And that was my only comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Don Taylor.
Yes, I was planning to comment after the motion was on the floor, but perhaps I'll respond to some of these points now. I was able to get inside the house and look at most of the windows, and my opinion is that they are in quite good condition. They're certainly repairable. There are a couple of mildew spots on a few windows, but nothing that is, shall we say, totally unfamiliar to most people who've lived in an old house with sort of basement facilities and that sort of thing. Anyway, the point is that over the years, I've seen quite a few windows that were being considered for replacement, and some of them have needed replacement, and almost all of them have not been original. They've been replacement windows, and the reason for that is that the quality of wood that's available in the last 20, 30 years is nothing like the quality of the wood that was used 150 years ago. That's one reason. So I think there's a feeling that sooner or later these windows, wood windows, have to go. That is really not the case. If they were reasonably good quality and reasonably maintained, they'll last forever. And there's absolutely no way that the heritage value of the original windows can be substituted by modern plastic vinyl windows. It's just a totally different environment. So I'll leave it at that for now, but I want to make some further comments when we are discussing the motion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Further comments? And seeing none, then move on to asking for a mover and a seconder for the approval of the recommendation with 3 clauses and the 6 conditions which follow it. Don Mitchell, Don Taylor has first hands I saw amongst many. Don Mitchell, do you want to speak first? And you don't have to.
I think I'm fine, Mr. Chair. I said my comments earlier. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Don Taylor?
Yes, this is, as we've noticed, it's the motion is a bit strange in that the application was for replacement and the recommendation is for repair. And the sort of awkward thing is that if repairs are internal, as we sort of hope they'll be, then the applicant has no further interaction with the heritage staff or committee, because internal attributes are not within the purview of this committee. And I think that's a big pity, because, and I feel sorry for the applicants, because that means they can't get advice that the certainly Heritage Committee and Heritage staff could provide. And when it comes to replacement of or repair of windows, there are many, many options that really have to be considered. And number one is the quality. What kind of quality are you expecting? And I was looking at Mr. Brown's quotation. That's clearly a kind of Rolls-Royce quality, and he's an expert craftsman. And what would really be nice in a case like this, where there's been decades and decades of repainting, would be to strip all the old paint off, repaint from scratch, so you can really see the profiles proper as well as possible. That doesn't have to happen, doesn't have to happen now. We can say, well, maybe next generation can do that job. Likewise, some of the wood joints could do with re-gluing or disassembling and re-gluing, and ideally that's what should be done, would be the best thing to do, but that doesn't have to be done. So these are questions, there are all kinds of questions. And another question is whether you want to get rid of the storm windows or not. And certainly that's possible. As I say, I've had the chance to look at these windows. I've also talked to Bruce Downey and Greg Sims, who are probably the leading experts in the area on heritage windows. And they've given me suggestions for going forward. And they are not necessarily expensive. But there are still choices. There's still choices as how to go. And so I guess one thing I would want to say is that I'd be happy to have some interaction with the applicants as to what options they could consider and what might be reasonable, and what kinds of weather stripping would be best for certain windows, and so on and so forth. So anyway, there's a lot of questions up in the air, and I feel kind of sorry that the committee, or sorry, that the applicants may not get all the advice that they would like. But the bottom line is, I think we have to support this recommendation and hope there's a good outcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oosterhoff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the question I have is, Ms. Campbell, you mentioned, so we know that there is flexibility in these homes to do work on the inside, interior. I was wondering about successful, have we shared with the applicant options to, to make the more efficiency through inside. There is a possibility of putting thermal paint on the inside, is there not? Is there that possibility? And the second question I have related is, what success have we seen in older historical buildings? Like where are places like in Europe going? Like, 150 years is this place here or something like that. And, so I mean, I question whether windows like these are meant to last forever. I don't think anything lasts forever. And so I just think that we could learn from, other countries where more time has gone by and what have they done?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oosterhoff. Yeah, the answer to the first question, of course, is this committee tends not to deal with interior. Not to say that we don't have knowledge about it, but it's not part of the mandate. I would suggest that the second part of your question is part of the work that the Ryan and his group are going to do in working through, can we repair, or is there a better way?
Yeah, I just wanted to breathe some life into the possibilities, for this application. Like Mr. Taylor said, it's very disappointing that they've come looking, and we're sealing the deal for them. That they're never going to, or almost never. It feels very tight, this recommendation to me, and so that's my concern right now. And and I'd like to see some flexibility into this motion. And so am I allowed to put an amendment forward for consideration?
Yep, you certainly are.
So I did write one thing here, if I can get my third computer going here. Goodness. I'm going to send this to, we may need a 2-minute break, Mr. Chair. I just want to send this to Elizabeth for a presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah, let me hear from, I thought Jennifer had a hand up there for a moment. Okay.
Thank you. I'll get this ready. Do
you still want to speak, Jennifer? Yeah.
If I may. I just wanted to comment on the interior consideration. And I mean, typically our designations, as you've noted, don't kind of address interior features unless they're exceptional or at the request of the homeowner or in some very specific circumstances. But I would just add, we have certainly had some preliminary suggested discussions about what interior storms could look like. There are options that are possible that would not require the sort of mounting of an exterior storm on the property after the windows were repaired. And I also just wanted to add to that comment, from staff's position, we think condition 4 and 5 actually leave a path forward if we see that the windows cannot be repaired. I think, as with many of the windows discussions of late, the key question always begins with, can the windows be reasonably repaired? And to Councillor Oosterhoff's question regarding kind of where are we at with international standards on kind of window repairability, we are certainly as staff tracking. There is actually an organization that draws together window experts from around the world who document approaches to window repair. And we've been looking at that as part of the policy update considerations. And I would just share at a high level at this time, happy to circulate that to the committee if they'd like to review. But I would share, windows can last a very, very long time. And if you are repairing them in a consistent way, you can see these windows last for, quite frankly, there's not an asset management life history on wood windows if they have been cared for and repaired appropriately. As with all good things, maintenance is a big part of this. And I think a lot of the discussions the committee is struggling with are in situations where not the cause of the property owner per se, but there has been deterioration beyond just routine maintenance. And so to get back into a routine maintenance schedule, there does need to be, a larger scale investment in getting those windows back to where we would like to then see, something that is much more manageable from a routine repair and maintenance perspective. So I just wanted to add those additional comments, Councillor Oosterhoff, because I share what you're saying in this approach, but I do think there is sometimes a misunderstanding that those windows have a lifespan, and they don't per se.
Okay, thank you. Have you sent your amendment in, Councillor Oosterhoff?
Yes, I have. And just to, I appreciate that, because we actually don't, we as humans don't live as long as the windows, so we'll never get to see that full story unveiled. So I do appreciate that. And I don't know when would our clerk have received that? I don't know where to fit it, because I don't have my other computer going yet, but I wonder if she Did you?
There she is.
Clerk,
She'll make
did
her
you-
comment. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I have received the councillor's email. I just need a moment in order to adjust it and put it up on the screen. If you could just give me a brief moment here.
Yep. Okay, Shirley.
Mr. Chair, the reason I wanted to present this was because of the very comment about the number of churches and manses across Ontario that will be lost, perhaps. And the effort that I'm trying to give this is not just for this particular community, though it's very important to us, but I worry about some of these decisions escalating the decline of these churches where, it's not just, we all struggle caring for our homes. And I think that if we provide, even though number 5 seems to provide flexibility, I think that the risk is too great, and that we could. This is an opportunity for us as a committee to provide just a bit of breathing room and to a situation and celebrate it. And we have to recognize that we're kind of here because the Heritage Committee from Pittsburgh community, that was even more rigid than how we see it. So I think we should be considering putting our touch on this and seeing something survive longer and be as supportive of a community.
Good, thank you. Elizabeth?
Mr. Chair, I'm ready to display the text that the councillor has sent me. Just a note, I do believe we need to do a little bit of a change just to get it to fit with the recommendation, but I will ask if perhaps staff can speak to it to indicate how they may be able to do this for us.
Okay.
So I'm just going to share the screen here.
I can explain it a bit more.
So it reads, in consideration of the request of the owners and representatives of 2368 Middle Road, the temporary option of replacement of the requested problematic windows be permitted for a time of no more than 5 years to allow for fundraising and completion, and of the remaining windows as listed, and as per Heritage recommendation, and also to allow for further review and consideration.
So, Mr. Chair, I could speak to that.
I'm just thinking how we fit that on, or whether it stands as a separate motion.
Mr. Chair, if I might interrupt, perhaps it would be best at this time if we could take a recess. This would allow staff to perhaps confer with the councillor on the wording that might be best appropriate to add this amendment as he would like, and then we can come back and take a look at that wording with the committee as a whole.
Okay, my computer says 10:43. Can we be back by 10:50? Okay, thank you very much. Take the break.
Mr. Chair, if I may just request a bit longer of a recess, just so that we make sure that we have the wording that the counselor is looking for. Would that be all right if we took another 10 minutes? I apologize to the committee for the length of time this is taking. Oh, you're on mute, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Another 10 minutes, gets us to 11 o'clock.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Chair, through you, it is 11 o'clock. I'm just going to make sure that we have quorum before going ahead. Perfect. Okay. I do see that we have quorum, Mr. Chair, so I'm going to share my screen and if you could read out the amendment, please.
So this is an amendment to the recommendation on D1, moved by Councillor Oosterhoff, waiting for a seconder, that the recommendation be amended to add the following at, sorry, I've got to move my pictures, at the end of paragraph clause 1, bullet 3, it being understood that the applicant be permitted to temporarily be able to replace the problematic windows for a period of no more, that should be, than 5 years from the date of approval, to undertake fundraising and complete repairs in accordance with the conditions. Looking for a seconder for that motion.
I'll second that.
That's Ted Smith seconding. Thank you very much. Ian, can we get the motion up on the screen, but so that I can still see faces? I'm not sure if you can do that.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure that that's entirely able for us to do.
Yeah, that's what I've realized. Let's just put it up on the screen so that we can at least take it in, and then I'll get Councillor Oosterhoff to speak to it. Well, that'll help me. Okay. Actually, I know what I can do, I believe. Councillor Oosterhoff, do you want to speak to your motion there? I'm looking for a seconded, yes. I'm looking for you, Mr.
Thank you,
Oosterhoff, to
Mr.
speak.
Chair. Yeah, and thank you to the seconder for a good discussion. I don't want to belabor the point a whole lot further. We've had a fulsome discussion of it, and I just wanted to breathe some life into this this property and to the representatives to make. I think one of the things that drives me on this is I've been there, and it's a beautiful family there, and there's some concerns about health, and I recognize that it's not just windows, but in this situation, if you're there, you'll see it's a concern with windows, and you know, ventilation is important, and I'm sure they will address those concerns. But you know, we've heard about what's happening across Ontario. We've heard that many communities, thousands of communities. And I think this could be just a great test case. These windows are not visible for a Made in Kingston solution to breathe life into the possibility that they will. I believe this community is honoring the heritage of this home, and their intentionality is clear, but they need time. And there's family living there. It will allow the work to be done on the problem windows, and for some time to go by for fundraising, and then securing. We're in a pandemic, you know, and that has impacted them considerably. So this is just an opportunity for us to just take a breath, give them a breath, to solve a problem with period relevant vinyl windows or something, and then let's look and see what the next 5 years brings. And I'm just suggesting that, and I thank for the committee for their consideration.
Okay, thank you. Ted, do you want to speak a seconder to the motion?
Yes, I mean, we've already lost a few churches in Kingston in the last number of years, and I'm not sure that imposing extensive repair bills on small community churches is a way to save them. So I think that this is a good alternative.
Okay, thank you. Others to speak? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I think this conversation about windows will always be a problematic one. It's not just in my mind, it's not just the window framing of a window, but also the beautiful panes, the heritage window panes. It's just beautiful to look through an old heritage actual window and the pane and the glass, the way it was blown together. You can see it, see the heritage character in the pane. But all of us, we of course feel the pressure on Mr. Bullock and the costly repairs. But I have a question with this amendment, and that is, doesn't this just add more to the cost, and wouldn't this add more to the frustration? And what I think I'm hearing is that if you actually had some help with somebody who really knows what they're doing, perhaps these windows could be repaired for not much more money, but what we're really lacking here is the knowledge and the expertise and some people who can actually help you through with this process. Is that correct? I don't know who should end. First of all, I'd like to hear from Mr. Bullock of what you think of the amendment, because I actually think that I personally wouldn't like it because it's double the cost almost. And it doesn't really solve it. And then you have these old heritage windows sitting somewhere waiting to be repaired, and then they can get further damaged. So I just think that I'm a bit worried about the amendment. So first of all, if perhaps I could get some feedback from you, Mr. Bullock.
Mr. Bullock? Yeah, you're muted at present, sir. Thank you.
Okay, and maybe as well, our clerk of session is on the computer as well. Maybe she would have a comment, but anything to breathe life into our old country churches to help us survive. We're not a big congregation, but we are looking forward to some better times ahead. We have done some work inside the manse in regards to a new oil tank in recent years and repairs to our furnace. We refurbished the interior of the manse. We insulated the manse, all little steps over a period of time to try again to breathe new life into that building. And the windows are probably our last concern, and anything the Heritage Committee can do to help us in that agenda. Money is the biggest concern, and we're not apt at fundraising. We've done a share of fundraising to survive, and we pledge we'd help, do as much as we can again. But I'm okay with Councillor Oosterhoff's amendment, so I am. I don't know if Ida Jean had anything to say or not, but.
Well, I'll let you speak, Jean. Normally we wouldn't, but if you do have anything to add.
I wholeheartedly support Councillor Oosterhoff's amendment. I think that it's a very good amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members of the committee wish to add to this?
No. Actually, can I just, I have, is that okay?
Okay.
I just want to say just want to point out the motion in front of us, the unamended, like what staff's recommendation in front of us does allow for like clause 5 or 6, I think it is, does state if the windows need to be replaced, that they would be replaced. And I think that would buy us some time to actually find some help, bring some tradesmen and experts to take a look at the windows and see if there's a way of actually repairing them in a costly fashion. And that's the challenge, just trying to protect the heritage, but not create too much pressure and onerous financial burden on anyone. And I don't think anybody in this committee wants to actually do that. But the way I read the staff's recommendation is actually that there is space there. If it needs to be replaced, that it would be replaced. So I just wonder if we could hear from Jennifer, if we could somehow help expedite this and get some kind of experts, window experts, to go over and have a look and give a quote, and so that it sounds like they didn't get any help.
Dr. Campbell.
Thank you, and through you. Certainly there was a quote submitted on behalf of the applicant from the individual they did ultimately get out to look at those windows, who was a qualified professional. That quote was described in the report as very high level. It was sort of like a worst case scenario cost on those replacements. It was quite high. It came in at $60,000 as we understood it, but it also identified that a window by window detailed assessment had not been completed. So I think staff would agree, Councillor Doherty, that beginning with an assessment of the windows is going to define what is the next appropriate step. And we do agree that the current conditions support consideration of what a replacement, if warranted, would need to look like or be. I would add to that just another consideration for the committee is that if the windows were assessed by a qualified professional, and again, I'm just using numbers here to demonstrate the concept, but let's say a qualified professional did look at these windows. We certainly, from staff's understanding and committee members who were at site, we didn't understand them to be in need of emergency repair. So there was nothing that indicated that these windows were going to essentially come out and we needed to close openings. But let's argue that for the moment that a qualified professional did say they required immediate replacement or immediate repair. So they're viable, but they do need immediate action. There is also an emergency approval process where in situations like that, as the committee has seen most recently, we did allow a replacement of an element on a home to be replaced with a timeline for that replacement's actual appropriate repair and restoration. I don't think that's what staff is seeing here, but I guess the key principle that I'm trying to convey here is the way that staff have crafted the recommendation is to allow paths of consideration. But again, the key element for us in our current in effect policies is we have to start with an understanding about whether or not repairability is possible. And then thereafter, we can work with the applicant to the best of our ability within the policies as outlined to try to prioritize. I know I'm speaking at length. I also want to make committee aware that the work does not need to be completed as an entire package. So though the repair recommendation addresses 9 windows, the applicant can phase that work in whatever way is appropriate, prioritize the windows that are in the worst condition, allow for fundraising to be spread out over time. They also can apply for the Heritage Grant to provide some limited support to this work, et cetera. So I wanted to make that clear as well to the committee. So we're not saying to the applicant, you must do all 9 in one shot. What we're saying is you're going to have a 3-year permit to phase and address this work in whatever way. And we are standing by the support on trying to find a good path if replacement is warranted.
Okay, thank you. Don Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. So while I'm hugely sympathetic and I think I understand the rationale behind the amendment, I don't think I could support it. And I can do it from a practical point of view, which is, working for organizations that are both designated exterior, but also designated interior, and having received permissions to remove attributes from use. The reality is that once they're taken out and replaced with something else, the odds of them going back and being repaired, the enforcement that's involved in making that occur, et cetera, I don't viably see it happen. And I even wonder if the amendment's a little beyond the scope of what we're really supposed to be doing. I still see the staff recommendations as the best course of action, likely the most cost effective, and other than something like 2 windows being damaged to a state that where you took them out and put the 2 together to create one window and hierarchy it in a location like the west or south facings where you're really trying to save that public realm experience and the attributes and the engagement. I could see something like that, but in terms of just taking them out as a temporary replacement, I don't practically see that as the right solution. And I do think it'll be problematic storage, whether they'll go back at all, and the cost still hangs there no matter what. That's my perspective.
Thank you. Don Taylor.
Yes, I have to say that I don't think the recommendation or amendment is a practicable one. As I tried to indicate earlier, in repairing, the repairing option has many different levels. And I am quite sure that the simplest level of repairing, which would just be putting interior sill sash in place, would be less expensive than replacing with vinyl. So it just, to me, doesn't make any sense to, first of all, replace these windows and then think about repairing them after that. So by all means, the more information we can get from more qualified people about the options and the different costs associated with them, the better it is for the applicants. But I don't think this recommendation is the way to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further speakers on the amendment? And seeing none, Ian, can I ask you to put the amendment on the shared screen again, please? Thank you very much. So this would become, I was going to say recommendation 4, but in fact it's printed here as to adding it to bullet 3. So before the word "and," it being understood that the applicant will be permitted to temporarily be able to replace the problematic windows for a period of no more than 5 years from the date of approval, to undertake fundraising and complete repairs in accordance with the conditions. Can we just leave that there for a moment? Sorry, I've got to read this one carefully. Thanks. It being understood that the applicant will be permitted to temporarily be able to replace the problematic windows for a period of no more than 5 years from the date of approval, to undertake fundraising and complete repairs. Sorry, but I've got to ask a question on the meaning of this. You can't see my arrow, can you? The third line, we have to undertake. Is the 5-year period meant to be in time to undertake fundraising and complete the repairs?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the idea I had, I see that too, but the intention here would be that those windows would be removed and preserved, and the entire project could be done in 5 years, perhaps, if that's what the church, the Mance committee would choose. But it would, so complete repairs was certainly the 3 windows that are problematic, or the 4, and that would be lots of time for budget, and also it could be the entire, however that were to proceed. But most of all, it would give them time, and it would give them, again, it's understood that those windows would be preserved perfectly, and perhaps they can be replaced. But right now, the livability is at risk. So that's why I said they could do the proper replacement now and then complete the repairs on the windows.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, I'd ask that in the minutes, Councillor Oosterhoff's explanation of that be there, because I think that this, as written, is probably a little, in the speed we've done it, is not as clear as would be. Don, are you still willing to speak, or is your hand just up by chance? Okay, further questions, and seeing none, then the motion, the amendment, which becomes recommendation 4, moved by Councillor Oosterhoff, seconded by Ted Smith. Those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. And those opposed? And that is lost by 3 votes to 6. So we go back to the written printed recommendation. Is there any further discussion on this? It has not been changed at all. So there are 3 recommendations and 6 conditions, moved by Don Mitchell, seconded by Don Taylor. Those in favour of that motion as printed, please raise your hands or shout.
Aye.
And those opposed? And that carries 8 to 1, 7 to 1. I've forgotten how many are here. 8 to 1. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, all
Thanks,
of your
everybody.
group.
Thank you.
And Jean, and good luck.
Thank you.
We move on to 2 to 4 Cataraqui Street.
That's me, Mr. Chair.
That's Alex. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So we have an application under Section 33 of the Ontario Heritage Act for 2 to 4 Cataraqui Street. This is a requested approval to modify 8 openings on the south side of the Woolen Mill building. Next slide, please. So the Woolen Mill is located on the south side of Cataraqui Street, abutting the K&P Trail and adjacent to the Great Cataraqui River, or otherwise known as the Rideau Canal. However, this application only pertains to the area formerly occupied by the boiler room gym on the south side of the building, circled in red just there. Next slide, please. The property contains a large red brick building. We all know it as the Woolen Mill, designed by William Newlands and constructed in 1880. So again, this current view is showing you the area where the application pertains to on the south side of the building. Next slide, please. The property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The bylaw describes the building as built for the Kingston Cotton Manufacturing Company about 1880. This red brick, many-windowed building is one of the very few large industrial buildings still standing. Its exterior has few alterations. Its interior has been well adapted to a number of modern uses. Next slide, please. So the owner is seeking heritage approval to modify 8 openings on the south side of the building. The 8 openings proposed in this alteration are currently blinded or partially blinded. So starting on the east elevation, the 3 openings are partially blinded, and looking at their design, they were historically window openings with their associated limestone sills. These original openings will not be altered, and the new windows proposed will match the design and proportion of the surrounding windows on the upper floors. This approach follows recommendation 18 of the standards and guidelines by designing and constructing a new window, door, or storefront when it is completely missing, with a new design that is compatible with the style, era, and character of the historic place, or a replica based on documentary evidence. Ultimately, this alteration will enhance the architectural integrity of this elevation and contribute to the cultural heritage value of the building. On the south elevation, the proposal includes the installation of new windows within what appear to be former door openings. The applicant is seeking to improve natural lighting in this space and is also working around variable interior floor level heights on the south elevation. To achieve the goal, the application is proposing to install windows in the upper 2/3 of the openings, forming poured concrete sills with limestone knee walls beneath. Again, the windows are intended to match the proportions and design of the surrounding windows. The poured concrete sills match the design approach that is also taken on other non-original sills on this building. The limestone knee walls will be set back from the original limestone foundation to maintain a clear understanding of the former door openings, as well as to allow for future reversibility. The requirement for further details of the limestone knee wall have been included as a condition of this approval to ensure that the coursing, the pattern, etc., are compatible with the existing limestone foundation, which is a heritage attribute of the property. Additionally, a condition has been included that requires compliance with the city's policy on masonry restoration in heritage buildings to ensure that the new masonry is physically compatible with and does not cause any damage to the existing adjacent historic masonry. This approach for the south elevation follows section 4.3.5 of recommendation 18 of the standards and guidelines by infilling the original openings with a new window and wall that are compatible with the architectural style and character of the Woolen Mill building. Next slide, please. So now we're moving to the west elevation, and here the proposal includes the installation of 2 windows within existing partially blinded window openings, as well as the lengthening of the northernmost window opening to accommodate a door to act as an entrance to the new office space. So the 2 original window openings on this to the south, including their original limestone sills, will not be altered, and again, new windows will be inserted that match the design and proportion of surrounding windows. So the more significant alteration on the west elevation is the lengthening of that northernmost window to accommodate an accessible entrance for the new office space. The possibility of relocating this entrance to one of the existing openings on the south elevation was discussed with the applicant, but for a variety of challenges and considerations, this continues to be the preferred location. So considerations included such things as interior floor height. So for example, the new interior floor height would be approximately meet the top of the proposed limestone knee wall. Also improving internal floor layouts to maximize available space, the ease of creating a barrier-free entrance, and security. So for example, centralizing access via the existing and a new internal vestibule. So the proposed double doors with transom light are comprised of an aluminum frame with glazing and a cream color to match the new adjacent windows. This design is contemporary and simple and will be less visible from the public realm when compared to the southern and eastern elevations. Given the proposed design and the rationale, staff do support this proposal as it follows recommendation 20 of the standards and guidelines, which advises designing and installing new windows, doors, or storefronts required by a new use on non-character defining elevations in a manner that is compatible with the building style, era, and character. Just to note that the proposed signage adjacent to the entrance on the west elevation that is illustrated in these renderings has not been finalized, and heritage approval will be forthcoming for this aspect of the project. Finally, as the pathway to the door is adjacent to the smokestack, an important heritage feature of the property, the applicant will also provide designs for this pathway and associated railing to heritage staff to confirm that there'll be no negative impacts to the smokestack masonry. So in summary, the proposed window and door alterations will conserve the cultural heritage attributes of this building. Reglazing the existing openings will contribute to the architectural style and character of the building. It will also improve the user's experience by providing significant natural lighting, which in turn contributes to environmental sustainability and an enjoyable office space, thereby contributing to the long-term adaptive reuse and conservation of this culturally significant former factory building. Thank you so much. And we'll move to the next slide, which includes recommendation, as well as a number of conditions on the next slide as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. Committee members, questions, comments? Don Taylor? Need to unmute yourself, Don.
Sorry, I thought I had. In my earlier comments, I suggested that it was possible that the partially blinded windows were original. Did you have a chance to consider that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So yes, to confirm on those the partially blinded windows on all three elevations currently have also a sort of transom light at the top that is not original, that is a vinyl insert. So I believe that they are later, well, certainly the vinyl's later, and I believe the blinding of the rest of the opening is later as well. And we do have the owner, Mr. Dornekamp, on the line as well, so he can confirm the timing of those alterations. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Thanks.
Jane?
Hi, yes, I have a question about what are these windows made of, and will they have external muntins as recommended in standards and guidelines?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. So the windows that are proposed will match what is existing currently on the woolen mill building. So the woolen mill, at the time of its adaptive reuse, obviously the best practice for window replacements was, of a different thought and thinking. And so the current windows do have internal muntin bars, and you are correct that, that would not be the preference today. However, staff are supportive of the proposal, just given that there are so many windows on this building and they are all viewed in relation to each other. So the understanding that there will now be there would be a continued consistency to how the windows look on the building. So that's our position at present.
I have another question, actually. So I think that those windows were installed roughly 1995. So vinyl windows, that would make them about 27 years old. Could someone comment on the lifespan of these vinyl windows that are currently installed? I guess what I'm trying to get to is perhaps if the lifespan of these windows is not much longer, the existing windows, then why would we replicate those and not follow standards and guidelines by having exterior muntins when those windows have been there for quite some time now? So if someone could comment on the lifespan of them, I appreciate that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I might suggest, I'm not sure if it's an appropriate time for Mr. Dornekamp to address that question, but I think he might be better placed to address the kind of quality and lifespan of the windows currently in the building, because he knows that building very well.
Certainly. Nate, if you're listening.
Yep, can you hear me?
Okay, yes, certainly can.
Yeah, commenting on the lifespan of those windows, that all windows require maintenance, but they're in great shape. And we don't have many issues with them. Most of the issues we have come from a specific event, but no, they're in great shape, and the lifespan of those there's lots of life left in them, and even more with how well we maintain them.
Okay, thank you very much. Jane, further question?
Yes, so I'm just wondering if we could still consider external muntins on these. I'm kind of looking at this little project as a separate thing. I mean, the building, the other upper windows are set back. This is its own little wing. I have a lot of difficulty accepting that something that was okay 25 years ago we should just continue to move forward with that. And I hope that someone could comment on that.
I can comment.
Oh, Nate.
Yeah. As a point of pride, I think those what's been done to this building, and maybe it's just the choice of words, is would be a little better than just okay. So there are a significant amount of windows on this building. There's a lot of windows, window openings this exact size. So I think aesthetically it's best to match what's there. We're putting in 8 more windows against the, I don't know, 60 some windows that are there. So I don't know if this is a chance to break that, but I'll yield that to the committee.
Okay, thank you. Dodd Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just quickly through you, I just wanted to thank staff for the comment about the railing to do with the new pathway to the door for the accessible entrance. The reason why I mentioned it, and it comes from real world examples, there's actually 3 little points. One is I've seen some brick buildings in town, heritage buildings, that have actually been scuffed up because of mechanical things running up and down the side. So that was one concern. The second one, I know where I work, the pile of snow up against the limestone and the mortar really does deteriorate it. And we've been advised to try to get it away from the building as much as possible. So that's why I raised it. And then the third thing I'll mention from Mr. Dornkamp, which he'll already know, but I'll say it, it's a real frustration when the rail is actually fastened into the pathway, because it gets in the way of snow removal and it can cause snow to collect in that area. So if there's any way to arrange the railing in a fashion that snow can be completely cleared from the surface and not hang out near the base of that lovely feature, that would be awesome. Thank you.
I respect that comment, and I agree with you. Blowing snow against a brick or a masonry building is a bad idea, and it's a standard of ours not to do that.
Good, thank you. I see no more hands from the committee. Nate, do you have any other comments or other members of the public? And hearing and seeing none, then I look for a motion to present, approve an unamended motion that you had printed. Moved by Don Mitchell, seconded by Paul Banfield, of 4 recommendations and 10 conditions. Discussion on that? We've worn you down at last, you see. Very, very good. Okay, those voting in favor of the motion as printed, please raise your hands, or Ted, speak.
Aye.
And I see all hands raised there. So that is, and I've forgotten my numbers again, 9 voting in favor and none voting against. Thank you very much, Alex, for that. And that moves us on to 420 Regent Street. It moves us into part 5, just to remind you. And this is you as well, Alex? No. This is Phil.
No, I'm afraid it's me, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Good morning.
Oh, it's you.
I'm still here.
I forgot all about you. Goodness gracious. Okay, welcome.
Thank you. So yes, this property is at 420 Regent Street in Berryfield. Can I have the next slide, please? The property is on the south side of Regent Street, mid-block between Drummond and George Street. Next slide. It includes a 2-story frame dwelling clad in vinyl siding. It was built around the 1900 and moved to this site, we suspect, in the mid to early 1950s. Next slide, please. The property is designated under Part 5 only. When the Berryfield District was passed in 1979, recently the plan was updated in 2016. It is noted as a non-heritage building in the district due largely to the fact that it's been heavily altered and not in its original location. However, the property does contribute to a number of attributes that you can see on the screen as far as the district goes. The next slide, please. I would note that the existing detached one-story garage is not noted in the property inventory. It appears that the garage was constructed at the time or shortly before, perhaps, that when the dwelling was moved to the property in the 1950s. So the application before us today has to do with this particular garage. The proponents would like to gain approval to demolish it. It's just a one-story gabled roof garage, and they next slide, please. And they wish to replace it with one very similar. It's actually the exact same footprint, about 60 square meters or 5 meters by 12 meters. It's a one-story. It will be slightly taller than the existing one, but within the 5-meter height limit of the zoning. It's to be clad in traditional painted horizontal wood clapboard siding on the front elevation, which is where the garage door is, and a composite or vinyl horizontal siding on the side and rear. The applicant hasn't settled specifically on the color, but considering a yellowish tone that matches the current dwelling. The roofing is to be an asphalt shingle, and there is a wooden cedar shingle detail above the garage, as you can see. The person doors are to be metal. The windows, there is to be a triple sash window, vinyl on the side, the western side of the building, and one sash window on the rear of the south elevation. And the garage door is a simple metal overhead door. There is a number of supporting information, including cover letter, elevations, and floor plans, and various pictures of the site, which are included some in our report and also extensively in Dash. So in terms of our review, section 463 of the district plan policies relate to demolition of non-heritage structures and notes that non-heritage structures may be demolished. The existing garage, as we noted, is a mid-20th century building. It's not noted as part of the heritage value of the property, and its removal will not be a loss to the district heritage value. In terms of the new construction, the Village of Berryfield HCD plan requires that new construction adhere to the character and rural atmosphere of the surrounding neighborhood in terms of tight massing, setback, roof pitches, and exterior materials. While new buildings should not try to replicate the historic style, their form and materiality should complement the heritage character of the district. Policy section 453 requires that new garages be lower in profile than the principal dwelling. This building, of course, while slightly taller than the existing, will still be well lower and set back from the primary dwelling on the property. Section 452 of the plan requires, and I have that in quote, that the use of traditional materials such as stone and wood siding for the public or the front elevation in new construction. Given the strict wording in this section, the owners have agreed to amend their initial plan, which was for final siding on the entirety of the building, to use a wood siding on the front of the public facade. The remaining sides will be a synthetic horizontal siding. The HCD plan, while it discourages the use of synthetic on all sides, it does not prohibit. And while staff encourage the owner to consider traditional cladding in place of the vinyl, given its location, well set back from Regent Street and well set back from George Street, with various buildings, fences, landscaping obscuring its visibility, the use of the synthetic siding, in our opinion, will have very little impact on the overall heritage character of the district. The applicant has proposed the use of white vinyl windows in insulated, partially glazed metal doors, which will reflect the rectangular and vertical proportions found in the district. The materiality and color of the windows on new buildings in the HCD are not prescribed by the plan. The plan recommends materials that are compatible with the heritage character of the district and discourages bright colors, but that's about where it stops. Staff therefore cannot support or can support the use of the vinyl windows in this particular situation. particularly given its location of the proposed building. And as a condition of approval, we have included the provision of color samples for the new windows as well as details to ensure that they complement the character of the district in their design. The plans include a small octagonal window, as you can see on the plan on the screen, above the garage door. While this is a minor feature that will have little impact on the overall village character, the HCD plan is rather specific in this situation and requires that vertical and rectangular dimensions and proportions have to be used in window design. So despite the fact that the main dwelling has a similar window, the HD plan was specifically crafted to ensure that these past inappropriate features are not continued in new construction. So staff have included a condition of approval that requires the applicant to amend their plans to either remove this octagonal window or to replace it with a rectangular opening. And I understand the applicant is okay with that condition. And finally, we'd always judge new construction and additions on standard 11, which you're all familiar with in the Parks and Canada standards and guidelines, which notes that new directions should be physically and visually compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the historic place. The new building will be designed to be compatible in terms of materiality, roof profile, and window design, yet subordinate to the nearby heritage buildings in terms of its height and size, and the modern arrangement of windows, materials, and the overall building design will provide a clear indication of the recent inclusion in the district. In terms of our circulation, this will require our building and demolition permits from our building staff. Our environment team noted that all designated substances need to be identified, and our planning colleagues noted that a minor variance may be required to recognize some of the setbacks for the existing building. And these have all been noted as conditions. In terms of our circulation with committee, largely we received no concerns from committee members, but some noted apprehension for the use of vinyl, and those comments are included in your agenda package. Next slide, please. So I would note, I think we had this come up a couple meetings ago, because this is a complete removal of a building. The recommendation has been broken into parts. The first, because as you know, under section 42 of the Heritage Act, the consultation requirements with Heritage Kingston are different for demolition versus the new construction. So the first part of the motion, which is on your screen, has to do with the demolition, and it's a motion from committee to council, and it has conditions to actually document the building as well as getting building and demo permits to remove it. Next slide, please. The new construction under section 42 does not have a role for the committee to play. So this is our standard part 5 motion, which is a staff motion that can be endorsed by a committee or not. And it includes a number of conditions, which I believe are on the third slide, next slide. So we support this application, Mr. Chair, and happy to take questions. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Firstly, members, can you confirm that your dash comments were correctly included in the agenda? And seeing nobody looking really unhappy, I will presume they were. Members of the public, and I'm not sure if we have members of the public with us still who wish to make comments and ask questions.
Mr. Chair, we don't have any members of the public in the gallery. I'm just looking to see if the applicant is with us, and I don't believe they are. If Mr. Leary could just confirm that for me. I don't believe we have any members of the public to speak.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, questions on this? And seeing none, final comments? And again, seeing none. Oh, sorry, Jane.
Thanks. This is just a comment for the applicant, and maybe Ryan can pass it along, but I know it's really hard to source good-looking garage doors that work really well with heritage properties or are heritage appropriate. And I would like to suggest that they might look for something that gives the effect of vertical rather than horizontal. It's just a suggestion. I think they might be happier with it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? If not, we have two recommendations here. As Brian said, they're slightly different. So I'm looking for a mover for the first recommendation, which is recommending to council the demolition of the garage only. I'm glad you included the word only in that, with two conditions.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could just interrupt quickly. We typically treat this as one full recommendation that is going from committee. So the entire staff recommendation is voted on as one.
Okay, in that case, it also has a part two, supporting new construction of a one-story detached storage building with 9 conditions attached. So you get to move all of that at one go. Looking for a mover. Looking for Don Taylor, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Doherty. Don, do you want to talk to that at all?
No, I think I'm happy. I think there are comments about improving the garage door design and perhaps replacing vinyl or something else, but those are just suggestions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, then I will put the motion as printed, the recommendation and the approval of the new construction as printed. There's been no changes. Those in favor, if you can raise your hands.
Aye.
And Ted will speak. Thank you very much. Those opposed? And that is all in favor. All present are in favor. Thank you very much, Ryan, for that. That takes us on to 167 Bagot Street. And I think
That's me, Mr. Chair. I'm back.
Yeah, I thought so. Good. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. So this is an application under Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act, because this is Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. So this is a requested approval to construct a one-story rear addition at 167 Bagot Street. Next slide, please. So the property is located on the southeast side of Bagot Street between William Street and Earl Street. Next slide, please. So constructed circa 1876, the subject property contains a 2-story red brick Victorian residence that forms part of a 4-unit terrace. Next slide, please. So the property is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act as part of the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. The property inventory form does rate it as significant to the district. Interestingly, the structure was originally wood and rough cast, but the facade and side elevations were given a brick veneer by at least 1892, and the entire structure was clad with brick by 1908. I've included a list, a sort of draft list of heritage attributes just for people's interest. So the red brick facade, it's 2-story terrace floor and massing, original window openings with wood sills, flat arches, and entrance with a transom light, and certainly the brick chimney. Next slide, please. So staff visited the site on January 18th, and the location of the proposed addition on the rear, which is the southeast elevation, is minimally visible, if not truly invisible, from the public realm. So in assessing any potential impacts of the proposal, staff referenced relevant sections of the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District Plan, which included section 5.2.2 and 5.4.1. Next slide, please. So the proposed addition is located on the rear elevation, which is centrally located within the terrace, further minimizing its visibility. The 1-story height and proposed footprint at approximately 1.78 square meters will be clearly secondary in terms of its size and in relation to the existing house. This small addition will also be constructed onto an existing contemporary 2-story rear addition and not the original row house. Accordingly, it will not entail removal, covering, or any other adverse impacts on the heritage attributes or other important architectural features of the original building, nor will it cause irreversible changes to the original building. Section 5.4.1 notes that additions are not required to replicate an existing heritage style and to make efforts to use cladding materials for additions to existing buildings that are complementary to but distinct from the existing building. So the proposed design will largely match the design of an existing rear addition on the neighboring property at 165 Bagot Street. This 1-story addition will be clad in vinyl siding to match the existing 2-story addition, as well as this smaller addition at 165. A 1/1 sash window and a single person door will define the southeast elevation. A shed roof with dark gray asphalt shingles completes the design. So this is a very simple design which ties in comfortably with the existing contemporary 2-story addition, as well as with the neighboring property at 165 Bagot Street. The design is contemporary and does not blur the distinction between new and old. And although vinyl siding and vinyl windows are not typically considered to be appropriate materials for heritage buildings, the existing additions were constructed prior to the designation of the district in 2015. And additionally, these very small additions are not visible from the public realm, and consequently, they're not viewed in relation to the original buildings from the public views within the district. In summary, the proposed addition will be invisible from the public realm, and its simple design and small size will not cause any adverse impacts to the heritage attributes of the subject property, sub-area, or the Heritage Conservation District. So the next slide contains the recommendation, as well as a series of conditions. Oh, there we are. And thank you, and I welcome any questions.
Good, thank you very much. First of all, members confirming their dash comments. And I will go first there because my comment is wrong. I could not, when I was looking at this on Dash, I couldn't get the picture of the window and the door that was being proposed. And I said it should be what is presently on 165. And what I really meant was that it should be the same sort of size and idea. So I would, if I was doing it now, I would rewrite that comment. Anybody else, everybody else happy with their comments as printed? Good. Members of the public, do we have the owner here, Alex, or are you by yourself?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Nikki Smith is the owner, and she is on the call if there are questions that she can answer, or if she wishes to.
Yeah, Nikki, do you wish to speak at present? Welcome. You'll need to unmute yourself and then feel free to speak.
Thank you. I thank you very much. This has been a very interesting process for me to listen through this morning. This is my first time sitting through a process like this. I only purchased this house last June. And the purpose of the extension, I think, which is not necessarily clearly, but it is in the drawings. This little townhouse is a one-bedroom townhouse and would very much benefit from the addition of a little half bath, so I could have a bathroom on the main level. I have older family and friends that we have to be very strategic about their visiting the home because it's a stairwell to get to the washroom. So very practically, that's the purpose of this addition. That those 2.5 feet is enough to give me enough room to create a small powder room as well as to renovate the kitchen. So that's really, I'm a new resident to the Sydenham ward, and I'm excited to be a long-term resident of the Sydenham ward. And so I would also say that I noticed that one of the comments that was given by one of the committee members was that there wasn't really a lot of detail about the materials that would be used. And what I would say to that is that because I've never done this before, I'm tending to be quite linear in how I'm doing it. So I truly haven't reached out to contractors to get specifics until I got this permit and the building permit. So that's why there's not a lot of kind of specific details about specific doors or specific windows, because I was waiting to get some feedback before I moved on to that next step. So thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words.
Good. Well, thank you and welcome to Sydenham District. And as condition 5 says, you're going to be talking with the heritage planning staff, Alex, and so on anyway on those materials. And so I'm sure they will give you lots of guidance. And confidentially, I would say follow it. They're good. Other members of the public? If not, committee members, questions? And seeing none, final comments? And seeing none, you have a motion with 1 recommendation and 6 conditions. Looking for a mover to move this forward. Jane McFarlane, thank you, and a seconder. Councillor Doherty just got in there first. Further last comments on this? And seeing none, then those in favour, if you can raise your hand and shout out if you're Ted.
Aye.
Thank you very much. And I see everybody voting in favour, and that will mean nobody against. So congratulations, Nikki, and that will go on to council. That brings us to the pre-consultation on 234-242 University. And I would remind the committee members when it comes to discussion and comments that this is purely the heritage aspect of the effect on Snowdon Terrace. There's no point in getting into long discussions on things which are not in our purview. So, oh, Philip, there you are, a real Philip now, sitting in front of City Hall. Very good. I think we said 10 minutes for the presentation.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is what I have been, that's my understanding as well. And
okay.
Appreciate it. I'm back. The jackhammering has stopped, so I can resume back to my normal place. So nice to actually see everybody and to have you guys see me. Okay, so this is an application, a pre-application that the chair has already mentioned for a pre-application that would require demolition and require alteration when that time arises. And this is for 234 to 242 University Avenue. At the moment, they're all separate lots. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we can see in the context map here, 234 to 242 University Avenue is located mid-block between Johnson Street and Earl Street and is viewable from William Street. Next slide, please. These photos show the existing condition of the facade, the carriageway, the view looking down south University Avenue, and the view looking west from William Street. Next slide, please. The property is designated with the following entry. The 5 dwellings of this stucco terrace were built in 1887 by contractor William Snowden. The wide wooden surrounds to the doors and windows, the transom lights, and all first-story openings, and the square opening of the carriageway make this well-preserved terrace a fine example of multiple housing. Next slide, please. So the applicant's agent is going to be speaking in this in more detail, but it's a very, very, very brief introduction. The top 2 images are the perpendicular proposal, and you can see the site plan and rendering there. And the bottom 2 pictures are the parallel proposal, the site plan and rendering there. Andre Scheinman has submitted a response to committee comments, and the agents for the applicant can speak to this shortly, and it's also available in the materials provided for your review. Next slide, please. Both proposals seek to restore the existing front facade while restoring and altering the rear facade of the designated row houses in the same fashion. And you can see in the top right-hand corner what that would look like in those 2 renderings. Next slide, please. In summary, the applicant is seeking feedback on both proposals from a heritage perspective, the parallel and perpendicular one. When looking for this application on Dash, please note that the entire property proposal is submitted under 240 University Avenue because they are still all separate lots. And at this time, I'd like to introduce the applicant's designer, Ray Zabek from Schultz & Zabek, who has worked extensively on this proposal and is eager to hear your feedback and report back to the project team after their presentation. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. And Ray, welcome.
Hello.
Hi, welcome back again.
Yes, I am. The owner of the property is excuse me a second here. The owner of the property has requested that we look at this proposal to, I guess we'd say in sort of development terms, to increase the kind of yield on that property. They seem to me to be very serious about restoring this building. That building is in, the 5 units on that site are in desperate need of repair and rehabilitation. They're, that building, 1887 building there, I'm not sure if the arched finish, the stucco finish on the building is original, or there may be some portions of it that are original. There's also a tremendous amount of repair work that has been done. And, you know, the building is a student rental. I think that's just a fact of life there on that strip of University Avenue. It is a student rental now. It will remain a student rental. But they are fully intend on restoring that building. In order to do that, I think the idea is they have to improve the sort of yield on the site by increasing the number of rental units, number of beds on the site that they can lease out to pay for this. And just, you know, keep in mind that the restoration of that building, the rehabilitation, rebuilding of a lot of the interiors in that building, that will actually be considerably more expensive than just building a new building in its place. I just like to sort of preface all these remarks with that. So we'd looked originally at the two proposals. The original proposal, which we liked, was a perpendicular proposal where we maintained a kind of courtyard running from the rear of the original building to the rear fence line, and using that courtyard as an entrance to 6 rental units on the back, 2 rows of 3. The one thing that we sort of struggled with that proposal was what it does to the neighboring properties to the north and the south. The rear yards will be confronted with this wall, which has very sort of limited fenestration in it. And, we're trying to do the best we can in terms of making the facades presentable along those side yards. We had some consultation with the heritage staff about this, and there was some, I think they can speak for themselves, but I think there was some support for that proposal. We did recognize those sort of side yards that we thought were problematic. The side yards, being that close to any development on this site, which is close to those adjacent property lines, is going to be limited to the amount of fenestration they have. So we opted to look at another proposal. It's basically putting another row of 5 residential units. These would be essentially identical units in a row at the west side of the property. That would maintain a courtyard between the buildings. The buildings, the original building, the lean-tos and the additions that were that have been evolved over the years in the back of that building would be removed, and we would put more sort of a disciplined design of additions on the back of those buildings. They would maintain the number of students in those buildings. I think there's currently 22 bedrooms contained within those 5 units. We would maintain the 22 rooms being housed in those buildings, and we would provide the new buildings would have there would be 5 buildings with 5 bedrooms each at the rear of the property. The building, there was some concern about the height of the building. This building with the flat roof is actually somewhat lower than the original terrace. It does provide the original building along University Avenue with some rear yard amenity space. It also provides the new building with some rear yard amenity space as well, adjacent with the fence line on the neighboring street. So we want to present both of these proposals and get your feedback on each one of them to kind of direct us a little bit in which way to go, instead of coming to you with a kind of preferred proposal on our part. We'd like to have a discussion with you to see where to get your opinion on this, and if any modifications need to be considered, we're all ears.
Okay, thank you very much. Members of the committee, questions, comments, thoughts? Don't all rush. Don Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. So I guess first, thanks to the Director of Heritage Services, because I guess this opportunity to comment wouldn't exist normally, but that mechanism has been provided. Your comments, Mr. Chair, at the beginning notwithstanding, I view this even as a part 4 and very close to the Heritage District, and sort of bridging between the University District and the Heritage District, but also kind of representative of the district as a whole, which I live in and work in. I think that the urban design part has to be sort of looked at a little bit. And I do think that there are attributes that are, they're important to heritage that come out in the urban design part. So it was interesting hearing some of the inception for the project and what the owner wants. I'm a little concerned at this design for the public realm meaning the view from the street as opposed to what's best for the property in the neighborhood as a whole. And I'm a little bit concerned about the sort of this binary of you have option 1 and option 2, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. For me, the carriageway, the most important aspect is actually the pass through of the carriageway and the reveal. So the courtyard design aspect is really cool. Dan Paralek in his Missing Middle work has examples of that. I may come back to that as well. And I think it's a really strong choice, and it's supposedly a forgotten form, arguably heritage, but a forgotten form. And there are many heritage examples of the courtyard type design for the lot. So that struck me right away. The other one was the height and massing versus the quality of urban design. And I know in Sydenham District in particular, but all the core districts, you get a lot of these developments and a lot of the public reaction to it, whether it's heritage or not. But in this case, I'll say heritage is the height and the massing that's being put on the property. And we always question whether or not it's too much for a given lot. And so that was interesting to me looking at this. And I wondered about things heritage wise, like trees. I don't think we should reward a backyard parking lot that's been there for years by saying, well, since a tree's not there, a tree shouldn't go there. And you were talking about the side neighbors and the quality of experience for them. And so things that came out to me were trees. I think this is a highly social interactive site. And I think that's really important for heritage, especially considering one of the listed attributes had to do with multiple buildings and the idea of lots of people. And so I think that this design, particularly in option 1, really lives that out. And I would argue that's a heritage attribute. Going further with that tangent, I would say that giving people the opportunity to walk through a carriageway and to experience heritage in an affordable option that they wouldn't otherwise have, I also think is one of the sort of intangible heritage things that's really brought out of this. If we can get more people in heritage part 4 properties, but also closer to the heritage district, I think that's a huge positive. And that's in this. So rooming houses and multiple housing units, et cetera, I think this really carries that out. I think it's a great location in the part of the city. I didn't like option 2 as much. And I will tell you why. It came across to me as not quite as equitable. It came across to me as more of a subservient build. I didn't like the idea that it was a building behind or a structure, a set of structures behind a structure. I felt the other one was more like a heritage district kind of feel, or a heritage property where everything was interacting with each other in a positive sort of way. I know it's standard comments, but Parks and Forestry both commenting no concerns. I'm one of few people who's got to look at the Heritage District and in fact entire Sydenham District from the tallest point in the district, which is the parapet walk of the spire at Sydenham Street United Church. And I think the tree canopy is really important. And so trees are really important in this aspect to me. And I think that forestry should be concerned. And I think that there's great opportunities there. And there's great opportunities for the neighbor and the residents there as well. So we segment all this stuff, but I do think they're heritage attributes. So I think the way that people experience a heritage property does matter. So when I look at option 1, I wonder about some of those views where I'm in the courtyard and do I see the whole building? The 5 buildings that are the Snowden structure, or am I only really seeing a very small snapshot of it because we've got so much building right up against that really you're only seeing a very partial bit of the back. I know there is space between the builds, but I felt like that type of stuff could be manipulated. And sometimes when we segment approvals, those things get lost. So Heritage Committee doesn't get to comment on that stuff because it's planning that's going to resolve that, or site planning that's going to resolve that. So, and I'm going to come back to scale just at the very end for a moment, but I agree with a lot of what Mr. Shinem said. In fact, I thought he was spot on. It's just that I think there are other tangible and intangible attributes that we don't often discuss as heritage in the structures that I really felt should come out. And all of that leads me to the idea of what is missing middle. And I have a differing perspective than some of the development community in that I don't think we need to point load every lot. So my question was, when I look at Dan Paralek's courtyard type designs, and he's talking 840 square feet for units, and in some cases he's talking single story dwellings that are put in behind in the courtyard, a cottage kind of feel, I started to ask myself, how is heritage enhanced or impacted by the size of the density? And so I warred with the idea that your two, because I am partial to option one, which is on the two sides, are those massings intentional because they're supposed to be sort of somewhat representative of the Snowden design? They're big, massy sort of buildings, or should they have variation, and should they have changes, and should they have more space, and should they have more trees? And how is heritage advantaged or disadvantaged by that aspect? And I think I'll just leave it there because I've talked for a long time. But to me, heritage really does need to be involved in the conversation of what is the appropriate scale or density, recognizing, as you said at the inception, there are costs to taking the heritage structure and rejuvenating it and repairing it and restoring it. And obviously then the development in behind is trying to recoup some of that value. Thank you for your time.
Good, thank you. Other members with comments? Del Taylor?
Yes, appreciate the applicants are trying to satisfy heritage and reality and so on and so forth. And I think they've tried hard to make it work on a heritage property. Particularly, I would favor the perpendicular approach, but I do have a problem with massing of the new structure. I guess the standards and guidelines says that additions or new buildings on heritage property should be secondary. And yeah, they may be lower, slightly lower in height, but with the massing that we're seeing, they're not, I don't think they're going to be secondary. I think they're going to be pretty apparent to neighbors on all sides. And I think that really does change the character of the street, of the block, and it does change the character of what is meant to be, kind of modest scale row housing, to have a substantial modern block behind it. So from a heritage point of view, I'm not really in favor of this kind of design. I would have no objection if the existing rear additions were considerably extended to provide extra units that would perhaps make the whole thing economical. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Don. Other comments, Jane McFarlane?
Yes, thanks. So I put a lot of comments on Dash, and I'm not actually going to go over those, but I have been looking at the standards and guidelines, giving that another review, and looking at exterior form 4.3.1. I have some concerns about the massing of these buildings, whatever they are, whichever format you go with, and in particular, the perpendicular one. And I think Andre Scheinman also mentioned in his January 26th response that that perpendicular view, the height and general mass, impacts the street and the neighbor's views. And when you look at it from the side, I do feel that it's way too intrusive. And when I'm just trying to get this up on 3 different devices here, but I'm concerned about viewscapes, form and massing, sunlight and natural ventilation patterns. So that is point 3 under 4.3.1. That's concerning with 2 new buildings or 1 new building of that size. I think number 6 is retaining the exterior form by maintaining proportions, color, and massing, and spatial relationships with the adjacent buildings. And I don't think that we're meeting that standard either with these designs. I just think they're too big, basically. And then 13 is selecting a location for a new addition that ensures that the heritage value of the place is maintained. And certainly in the perpendicular model, I'm not sure that that is being adhered to. And again, I would reiterate the whole thing in terms of massing and exterior form and the setting. So I'm thinking about the whole property, and I'm really concerned about the size and the massing of the buildings as proposed. I don't really know what to suggest other than a larger addition on the back is a possibility, or something that's much smaller in scale so that it is seen as subordinate. The other concern I have is, as I said in my dash, was just the whole issue of accessing for building and building maintenance. And yes, it's cool to go through that carriageway. I think it's really exciting. However, bringing bins and deliveries and, well, construction to begin with, and deliveries to those buildings through the carriageway, I have a lot of concerns about just continuing to maintain the structural integrity of the existing building for construction and also for maintenance. And, you know, even the whole garbage bin thing along, which is the visual aspect in front of the heritage buildings in the streetscape. We're adding 5 more units to 5 units that already have garbage and recycling and parking. Those are some of my concerns. They need to be, these buildings, or whatever happens here, needs to take into consideration the existing building and to be subordinate to that building. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Others? Oh, seeing, oh, Bridget, yeah. You need to unmute. Thank you.
But it didn't accept it. There you go. Thanks. Well, actually, I think this is a pretty clever example of infill. And if it is done, I hear the concerns about massing, and I agree with that as well. I do really like, though, the first set of drawings on page 142, the examples where they're not, they're the 2 separate buildings in the backyard with a courtyard. It reminds me of very European kind of look. And certainly in Europe, you go through these courtyards and you have these other buildings in the back. And I think it's very attractive kind of look. But we do need to be mindful about the massing. I think that's a very, very good point. I think you're onto something here, and some tweaking, if you could just make it smaller. I think it would be a really kind of neat and exciting project. And we do really seriously need the infill in especially downtown.
Good, thank you. I will just add then, Ray, if nobody else, and it'll only take a moment. We talk about the view through the carriageway. However, when you walk around this block, Johnson, Earl, and Alfred, you do see between houses all the way around. It isn't just through that carriageway, and I hope you'll keep that in mind, that it's a pretty open block between the built houses. Jane, do you have a hand up again?
Yes, I just wanted to ask about airflow. I just want to reiterate that point. Airflow, sunlight, and especially the perpendicular option. I'm just concerned about the properties on either side feeling boxed in by that. And the house, the existing terrace as well, and whether or not they're going to get airflow, sunlight, etc. And I think the point is well taken that we need some more trees in the downtown area as well. So I just want to ask that question if it's been considered.
Good. Otherwise, other comments? Ray, do you want to have any last word? You've got lots to think about.
Just to address a couple of things here. On option one, the little nodule on top of those buildings that's shown on the illustrations here is expendable. We had put that up there as we were going to, we developed the designs of these a little bit. There was going to be mechanical equipment was going to be in that little room. As well, that would provide you with a rooftop access for a portion of each roof, not the entire roof, but a portion of each roof would have offered the students a chance to go up and enjoy that. But I think we've come to the conclusion that, that although you would not see that as you were driving down University Avenue, it's marginally, I think, 2 or 3 feet higher than the ridge of the terrace. But that was been one suggestion we've talked about with the owner, to sort of formally keep the building lower. To be quite honest with you, my preference of these two proposals is the second one, the parallel version. That version, from a functional standpoint, provides all the students in this complex with their own, you say, their own sort of private, not quite private, but their own defined amenity space, as well as the kind of public space for getting into the units in the courtyard. The rear of the building on the parallel version would have small yards that would be adjacent to the yards in the adjacent street. As far as trees are concerned, I mean, it was our intention to make that courtyard quite green, was to plant trees. And I thought the illustration, maybe the illustrations that we presented don't. Well, sometimes trees can get in the way in the illustrations of illustrating the building, but I think we have absolutely intend to green those courtyards, and we would try and do it in a way that the courtyards that the trees would survive. This is a student building. As far as comments like garbage and recycling, that's a sort of that will come up in the planning review of this proposal. But we're very aware that those streets are subject to a lot of problems with that sort of thing, and we would want to have a protocol designed into this project that would address that concern. Just going through some of your comments here, the massing of the building. We have perhaps it would be, we're showing you images of the building. When you step into that courtyard, the renderings tend to make the buildings a little bigger than they actually will be perceived by the eye. So it might be a good idea if we gave you a little more kind of illustration of the the actual physical massing that these buildings present. There's been some suggestion about expanding the buildings, the existing terrace buildings, to the rear, providing more capacity in those buildings. I just want to point this out to inform your sort of evaluation of these proposals. When we are subject by building code to limiting distance requirements. So when we expand the two buildings on 242, or sorry, 234 and 242, the end units, we would not be able to put large or any kind of good size windows on the north or south facades, the south facade of 234 and the north facade of 242. I might have that backwards, but the windows facing the adjacent yards would have to be quite small or almost non-existent if those two buildings were expanded to the rear. There have been proposals put forth on this property to sort of combine all these units into one massive, complex with a public corridor through the middle and apartments, which basically eliminates the exterior spaces that are created in this proposal would become more kind of accidental spaces, just kind of leftover spaces, we looked at this problem as an opportunity to design an interior courtyard space on this property. And you're right. I mean, that experience of walking through the passage or running through the carriageway into the courtyard would be a really sort of nice experience. We are subject to, of course, we're getting comments regarding the kind of practical design of the project. There are some issues. We've been talking to the fire department about access for firefighting, garbage and recycling removal that has come up. So we are aware of these things. We do think that particularly the second version is a subordinate building to it's actually taking cues from the original terrace building, and we see that as a subordinate building to the terrace. It has less detail, it's smaller, it's sort of more rigidly rhythmic than the facade or than the original building. But we do see it as a subordinate building and is obviously distinctive in terms of its architectural design. There's no question that it's it is not trying to copy anything. It's building standing on its own, but it does have that rhythm, that the sort of an abstraction of the rhythm of the building on the original terrace building on University Avenue. As far as this discussion about the well-being within space, ventilation, sunlight, I think the second option addresses those concerns. The courtyard is substantial in between those two buildings. This courtyard will get south light. The neighbors will get south light. The neighbors to the north will get south light. They'll continue to be able to enjoy their backyard, although you should see that backyard. It's a different experience. Anyway, I'll stop there, but I appreciate your comments, and we'll take this back. And
Okay, thank you. I see Paul with a hand up. Got a last comment, Paul?
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I'll try and make it I will make it really short. I guess my concern, and Mr. Zabek, I certainly appreciate your concept. It's a very interesting one. My larger concern, I guess, with the larger picture is if this goes forward, are other applications going to come almost every month from others around that area in particular? And the next thing we know, we've got infills going, and infills, yes, I understand infills, but the next thing we know, we've got nothing but very few trees, and we've got no parking. And Queen students like their vehicles. I realize there's a lot of students that don't have vehicles, but there's a lot that do. And where do those cars go? Does Queen suddenly just level a block to make a gigantic parking lot? Anyway, I could go on, but I won't. It's 12:30. I think it's time we all go for lunch. But anyway, just to record that I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just very concerned that this could be the thin edge of the wedge for that area. Thank you.
Okay, Jane, briefly for a second time.
Yes, thanks. I just had a question about the parallel version. I'm assuming then that you can't actually, if you are going to say have garbage in the back and take it through, you'd have to bring everything through the house or the unit to get it out to the front of the street. And it's like the backs of those houses really don't have much access. There's no laneway back there. There's no, you have to drag everything through the house. So that concerns me in that courtyard between the Heritage Building and the parallel version is going to end up the place with all the bicycles and garbage bins and everything else. So from a practical point of view, the odd backyard there on the parallel one is kind of worrisome to me as well. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you all for your comments. Ray, thank you for your time, and no doubt you've got lots to think about, and no doubt we'll see you back again soon.
All right, thank you.
Good, you're very welcome. Okay, that brings us down to working group reports, and I see 2 sets of minutes from Heritage Kingston Review Working Group. And I believe we have to accept those. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. If we could just have a motion to accept them.
So I look for a mover and a seconder to accept the 2 sets of minutes from the Heritage Kingston Review Working Group, moved by Don Taylor, seconded by Donald Mitchell. Any discussion, questions or anything on those? Seeing none, then ask you to vote in favor.
Aye.
Or thank you, Ted, or opposed. And that is carried by the 7 who are still with us. Emergency approvals. Ryan, any emergencies?
Not this month, Mr. Chair.
Good, thank you. Motions, I don't believe we have any. Notices of motion? And seeing none. Other business. Dr. Campbell, I think you had a few words to say.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I'll be very quick. I just wanted to share with the committee that Paul Robertson, City Curator, will be receiving an award this evening from the Kingston Historical Society for his service over the course of his career in many facets in the city and his work to kind of preserve and conserve the history and heritage of Kingston. So I did just want to share that with the committee. I know many of you do know Paul, and so he will be receiving that award this evening. We're very excited for him and very supportive of his selection. And then I also just wanted to draw to the committee's attention that next week is Heritage Week in Ontario. So staff are certainly going to be providing some updates over social media about that week, but just sharing that with committee members in case in your spheres of interaction and influence, you wanted to find time to celebrate heritage. Next week is officially set aside for that purpose in Ontario. So that's all from me, and thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Other business that members want to come up with? And seeing none, there are correspondence there from the Ontario Heritage Trust. And more on 240 University, which brings us down to the next meeting, Wednesday, March the 16th, 9:30. And unless somebody has got something that they've been overlooked for, look for a mover to adjourn. Oh, look at that. Goodness me. We'll take Jennifer and Paul Bamfield. And I believe that is easily carried. Those in favor of adjournment. Thank you all. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, everybody, for a longer than usual meeting. Okay, see you next month.